Well, all right, everyone. Come on in, come on in, come on in. Good morning, and I'm taking a few seconds to gather myself together to get ready for this presentation. So, you guys, as you can see on the screen, get your coffee ready as I twist and turn here in my chair. And I am going to go get my coffee. Okay, it's taking me a couple of seconds to gather my wits about me and get myself turned around properly. I am so glad that those of you who could log on have logged on. Please, as you are getting settled in, go ahead and type anything in the chat that you need, a comment here or there. I'm going to welcome all of you to this morning's session of All for Success. Here at All for Success, we like to take a look at a lot of things happening around and in and around the world of the Sussex family. Um, I am a great supporter of the young couple, Harry and Meghan, and I am interested in how they are dealing with and overcoming many of the obstacles that they are being faced with. I find it interesting and intriguing on a number of levels. Now, here at All for Success, we do a lot of Sussex support, chit chat, of course, but I also like to look at things from the perspective of being a parent myself of adult children. Myself, like Miss Doria, who is Meghan Markle's mother, I am also a grandparent. And so we're the grandmas that are looking on and seeing what we're seeing. And we're somewhat fascinated and, in a sense, mind blown by some of the things that we are seeing that young couple is encountering. So, with that in your thought process, and keep that in the back of your mind as I go along on through some of this um, chatter, the chatter for today. All right, all right. So get your coffee out. You got your coffee ready? I hope you're good to go. Let me see if I can find the slides that I prepared here this morning. I call them slides, but you know what I mean. The little cards that kind of keep me on track um, as much as possible, as much as can be done to keep me on track to think about what I'm saying. And the bigger part is not just what am I saying, but why am I saying it? It's funny as you work through some of these things, you begin to forget often why you're talking about what you're talking about. Now, we also, I really, really started to fall in love with many of the other Sussex friendly channels that are out there in the YouTube sphere. And the reason for that is many of them are very positive in the way they deliver um, their information. I find it really lovely that so many of these people who have wonderful YouTube channels, and I mean, they're pulling down a followership of in the thousands. And I am going to try to learn how to do that, how to increase the number of people who might see what I have to say if they're interested, and sometimes some of the interesting feedback and the support. That is the angle that I come at this from. But I am intrigued often by many of the other YouTubers and those specifically that are Sussex supporters because they have huge followings of people who are what would be a parent in a parent agreement. In other words, what is nice to know is that there are many people who are watching this situation, and they may not be saying anything. They may not be participating, like we're not on the news. We don't own magazines, but it is intriguing to be aware of the fact that many people are watching what is happening, what is going on. They're hearing it, and they are forming opinions based on what they hear and see. And I have to say that I find that really also a very positive thing in light of what we see happening. Okay, so let me see if I can find what I call my cue cards to help me keep track of what I am trying to get at today. All right, so okay, let's test this system. So here we are. I hope this is showing up like it's supposed to on your side. I keep getting notifications that, oh, it's possible that you're going to be losing bandwidth and, fighting for network resources. We have all that going on out where I am. And I am in the central time zone. I just thought I would mention that for any of those of you who have a question. Okay. So let's begin with um, our number one placard up here. And what does this indicate that you need to do? Folks, we all need to list, if we do have an opportunity, post down here what your fitness journey has been over the past week, whether you got any walking time in. So I walked approximately 1 mile each day and went to the gym twice this week. So I at least get to put that down. Now, I did try a different bike. I wanted to let you know that I rode on. I did a different bike at the gym this time. I went in and I got on one of the bikes where you lean back and then you pedal as you're leaning back. And I got to say that um, that bike was much better for the lower back pain that I have. Okay. Again, like I said, folks, I'm a grandmother. Okay. So let's make sure we get that out there. So I was trying to ride on the bike, and most people say, well, if you can, you try to work your way up to doing at least 30 minutes on a bicycle, on the little bicycle. And they did have Peloton bikes at the gym, and they have the ones that they use for those spin classes. And you just kind of sit up. Look, now here's what's really nice about those too. I ride my own bike. I have a regular little mountain bike, 10 speed, but the seat is very uncomfortable. And if any of you are familiar with the average bicycle, you know that the seats are fairly small and pretty tight. So when you're riding, if you're going to ride for any amount of distance, the seating wouldn't be very comfortable. And this is, of course, for folks who are grandparents, right? Now, in the gym, I found, which was I had did not notice at first, but I found that the bikes that they have for you to work out on, that they've actually adjusted the type of seats that they have. And so the seats are fairly comfortable. And I want to tell you that that was a very, very great add-on. All right. So don't forget to put in the chat. All right, everyone, I'm going to call out. Put in the chat what your fitness routine has been over the past week. I want to hear that you did aerobics. I want to hear folks who did yoga. I want to hear some feedback because, like I said, I need you to motivate me. So let's get in there and get at it. All right. Okay. So here's where we're going to start this fun day off. All right. So, you know, little kids, it's funny. Sometimes you get a glimpse of what little kids might become interested in when they become big kids, right? And here you see little Harry dressed as a little soldier, and this photo for me is the cutest thing that I have ever seen. To me, it's just adorable. But it is so striking to me, especially when I think of my own granddaughter, that you see the little ones doing things and playing with things and having fun. Um, dressing up in different little outfits and costumes, or even when their parents put them in them. But you get a glimpse sometimes in a little kid, in a small child. You get a little mind blowing glimpse of how their future might become. So we're looking at the Harry, the little soldier. And I think what is sad, what is frightening in a sense, is that the UK, many people in the UK, especially if they're in my age range, this is who they think Harry still is. They really haven't allowed him to grow up in their minds, right? And it is very often the case when we are older, right? We look at someone who we've seen as a child, and we can picture all of their antics as a youngster, and we think that every element about them as a youngster is pretty much the same even when they grow older. Now, in the case of the UK media, tabloid media, of course, that is the image that they would like to maintain of Harry. They want you to keep Harry in your mind as a small child, or they want to keep him in your mind as a rowdy, um, undisciplined teenager that doesn't do anything except go to parties and have a great time and fall out of vehicles, fall out of a car, drunk, going into the club or out of the club. The UK media has an extreme interest in keeping that in the forefront of your thought. However, without them knowing it, the Harry that they're actually dealing with today is not that little young boy running around outside of a plastic playhouse. They are dealing with this Harry, the former special ops, militarily trained, psychologically trained, warfare trained military man who is disciplined and grew up around the military environment. Now, I was prior military myself, and I think that in some cases there are many benefits to being a service member. And when you're growing up in that period of time between teenage and young adult, trying to figure yourself out, understand who you are in life, being in service, it definitely will create a foundation for certain elements. There will be a foundation of discipline. There will be a foundation of attempting to achieve a goal. And one thing about the military service is that it can take you from a person that may not believe they can accomplish things at a certain level. It will enhance that ability, because coming into the service just overall, you may not believe you could run 2 miles carrying 50 pounds. But when you join the military, they will take you from a person who did not believe you could accomplish that. And when you are done, you will know that you are not only a person that can accomplish that, but that you can accomplish even more. So it is, those are the elements of the military that I think are fantastic in what it can do to train the individual, the heart, the mind, and the soul. And in fact, the UK media, the UK tabloids, they believe they're still dealing with the I'm just drunk at the club Harry. And they're not. They're dealing with the post military man, also married, adult, father of two. But they haven't figured that out yet. Now, with that on your mind, let's talk about how they fared over this past week. So, for those of you who are following along, the book In Game came out, which was by Omid Scobie. And Omid Scobie was a very intense Royal Rota member who worked in and around the royal household and followed different family members around for different engagements and reported on things like whether or not the kids did this in school and so forth. But his interaction with Harry and Meghan and being the individual working in that arena, he gained an insight, a little bit more depth. And his book has started to make its way back around in the numbers. The numbers were doing pretty well at the beginning once he started off. But then he had this huge slump, of course, after the UK tabloid media did a campaign to blitz all of the hard work that he did, and they tried to reduce the book into a soundbite about Harry and Meghan probably wrote it. Okay? So they tried to reduce the legitimacy of the book and what the actual author was talking about by smearing this feature with the fact that it's that he's Harry and Meghan's mouthpiece. Now, I have been combing through excerpts of the book, and I am still waiting to get my I'm thinking I'm going to go with the copy that's in the audio. Um just FYI, for background, I listened in on one of the TikTokers who did a live interview with Omid Scobie. And it was fantastic because you really got to hear him speak about his book, which was excellent. How he came to report some of the things that he reported. In his storyline and in the excerpts, plus the interview that I was a wonderful had an opportunity to be a part of, he is very clear that he is speaking basically about how the royal reporters work. He is talking about the working interaction between the royal family, the UK tabloid media, and how it interacts with other stories. He is discussing, I would call it, the efficacy of the media. And you have to understand from where we're looking. Now, I mean, I'm a USA, born and bred. So our attitude and our thought process on what an actual reporter does is a little bit different from what the UK media landscape has become. When I grew up, not to age myself, but one of the top reporters was a man named Walter Cronkite. I'm sure you all have heard that name. I wish I had grabbed a photo of him. I didn't think to put that up. Walter Cronkite and the men who were like him, the news came on at 6 o'clock in the evening, and then the news came on again at 11 p.m. at night. This was the ritual. The news lasted 1 hour. He would come on, he'd sit there in his suit and tie, and he would talk about today's headlines. And it would be a couple of headlines from overseas, perhaps, a note or two about something that happened nearby, and then maybe several stories of the largest things happening in some of the most peopled cities, right? Okay, it was just the news. The stock market, businesses, they would just basically drone on and on about what was happening. Generally, the news was very, very dull, very, very boring, at least to us as young kids. But it became a situation where they would go out, they would take down notes about what happened, ask people questions, and then they would come back on television and report that. It did not turn into this quasi trying to keep people entertained situation until probably very late in the 1980s or maybe late 70s, 80s. And with the invent of CNN News, I mean, that is when news started to become an international money-making business. So it changed and it challenged the way that news was gathered, and it challenged the way news would be presented. And thus we have this crazy landscape we live in today, where when you're reading or watching television and they're telling you something that happened, whether it's to a person, an individual, or to a group, or even to a nation, there are parts and pieces of that story that are specifically designed to make you feel a certain way. People who are talking to you may or may not be actually telling the truth. So now you might hear a story from any particular area about any particular activity or event, and you actually have to ask yourself, well, is this actually true? Did this really happen? And of course, social media has played the part of revving that engine up 5 times what it used to be. Because now it's like everyone with a cell phone camera can snap photos and put their own underlying story beneath what they are hearing. So you have to really be very, very cautious, very careful about what you think is actually news. And the UK tabloid media is presenting itself as a news source, but it is not news. Their reporters are not going out to gather factual information. They're actually on television, bringing people on TV before the camera, before millions of people, to simply answer questions with their opinion, right? So, you can just say to someone on camera, they can ask you a question. Well, did Michael Jackson have pizza for breakfast? And they can just have a person sit there and say, well, I believe Michael Jackson ate pizza for breakfast every day. And, if you notice, he really, really loved pizza. And this becomes a story. And and you have to be aware that, well, that was absolutely made up. But that is what UK tabloid media has become. So back to Endgame, I encourage those of you who are interested in it. Now, I know some people may not be, or they may not be an Omid Scobie fan, and that is all within your realm. However, some of the things that he outlines and some of the connections with various personnel that worked in and around Kensington Palace and the royal family, it is very interesting and it is intriguing, and it is worthwhile in understanding the names of the people who are involved and how they are connected. So I think one of the to me, the only thing that I think was kind of moved to the side, and I'm going to mention Dan Wooten specifically because we all are aware of how his situation blew up and where he ended up in a situation where people were actually saying, talking about the specific nefarious things that he was doing. You find out that many of these people are connected in ways that you didn't realize they were connected. And that might be driving some of the stories they tell, some of the things they back, and some of these negative impacts that they had on Harry and Meghan over those years. The reason why they would do these things, because you and I sitting on the sidelines, and just like with Meghan Markle's family members, we're sitting on the sidelines and we're asking ourselves, why in the world would this person do this? Well, in one particular instance, for example, with one of the stories that is outlined in Endgame, you find out that two people that were passing information between themselves were actually lovers in real life. But they were a couple that on the surface you may not have known they were a couple. But in fact, you find out that they were lovers behind the scenes. So giving having a conversation and providing information about a particular situation from the individual located at the royal family, for them, that was what they did and passed that information on to another key prominent figure in the news media. So this is what Endgame offers. So I definitely would encourage any of you who are interested to check it out. All right, moving on. I'm sorry. I'm trying not to take up too much of your time. Now, we're going to kind of divert here, and I'm going to kind of divert into, let me tell you how I think about some of these things. Let me tell you what I'm seeing, okay? There is a show called, I believe it is Palace Confidential, okay? And the character that you see in one of these photos on the left side is Mr. Richard Eden, and he's supposed to be a senior royal correspondent, right? So he is supposed to be a pseudo mouthpiece of the feelings of the senior members of the royal family. So, for example, he sees himself, I'm sure, as a surrogate spokesperson for King Charles. That's probably how he sees himself. Often he will he will of course regale the population, regale the channel with how harsh King Charles needs to be with Harry. He often will insinuate how the king should never forgive Harry. There should be no way back for Harry. That Harry has done the king so much harm. He's been so awful to the queen consort. And he was so awful and vicious to King Charles and queen consort. And now he's just awful to the Cambridge family, that being William and Kate. This man is the mouthpiece. And what he is talking about, he constantly regales about what he thinks the king should and should not do, how the king should or should not respond. And he's always a fantastic character about what he thinks Harry and Meghan should or should not do. Now, here's something that I found very interesting about this. And I want to throw this comment out there for you all. And then I want you all to pitch back. Please comment, folks. I want you all to comment back so I know you're out there. I want you to pitch back to me what you think this means. Now, I'm going to set this up. King Charles is a king, right? He's supposed to be sovereign over a great many nations. Don't you find it intriguing that there are people like Richard Eden, the Pierce Morgans, the Dan Wootons? Don't you find that intriguing that they will come out in public and actually say what they think the king should do? I mean, to be honest, like technically, if you are a royalist and you are a true believer in the monarchy, how would you dare? How could you possibly dare utter the words, I think the king should do this or that that the king shouldn't forgive his son, and the king should take a harsher stance? I mean, if you're truly a monarchist, isn't it interesting that you believe you can say what the king should do? I find that very, very intriguing. And here's why. What it would send, the signal that it would send to me is that the king is actually a puppet. And he's a puppet in such a way that you feel, as a, let's say, correspondent, news presenter, UK tabloid personality, that you actually believe you can speak for the King of England. Now, a true monarchist would never dare. That would be called being presumptive, right? For me to walk up to King Charles and say, you know what, King Charles, you know what, you really ought to do this. That in the olden days could get your head cut off. So it's remarkable to me today that that is their behavior. And the reason I'm throwing that out there is, here's the thought. Is it perhaps because the king is more of a puppet than we know? Okay? So think on that for a minute. Now, I'm going to remind you all while you're thinking about that. Listen, please like, share, and subscribe. Um, and, and tell everybody about the channel. Feel free to leave a comment. I would love to read them later, and if I get a chance, I like to answer them. So make sure you get out there and like, share, and subscribe. And once again, I'd like to welcome all of you to All for Success, just in case I'm missing anybody. Okay? So you get my point. It's it's something subtle, but it is something that I want us to move our thinking towards. Before we get too wrapped up in the negative versus the positives. It's just the idea that there are people out there that are actually saying in public, on television, what the king should do. All right. Now, we do have to report that Harry this week had very, very good news. And that good news was the fact that the lawsuit that is currently moving through the UK court system, that the decision that was rendered upon it was that he actually was awarded damages. Now, this came right after the fact that he was supposed to pay somewhere around $92,000, but I believe it's like in pounds, I believe it was something like what was it, 80,000 pounds or something like that. He was supposed to pay in order to keep this case moving forward. And so, of course, they're going to continue to push this case forward. And so once I guess they became aware of the fact that whatever they come up with to try to stall Harry, and the UK legal system being very bizarre, as we are watching it, it is an apparent system that if you are the person who is actually aggrieved by an institution, that you almost have zero recourse in surviving that legal case. It's very difficult. But his case, this particular one, this wiretapping accusation, which was, or rather, phone surveillance, phone hacking, I think is the term they were using, because it involved situations where various voice messages from telephone calls of various people were being tapped into, listened to, and in some cases, listened to, modified, deleted, so that the actual person making the phone call thought they were leaving a message for their relative, loved one, or whatever. But instead, there were UK reporters in the tabloid media that were listening in on those voicemail messages. So they intercepted quite a bit of information. Now, in Harry's case, that could be about a number of things because this appears to date back a ways. And from what I'm reading, this case also included, I believe, 100 other litigants. One of the situations, one of the cases, which I thought was phenomenal and definitely worth mentioning, was this situation where a child went missing and the parents had been calling the cell phone, right? So they would call the cell phone thinking, okay, well, maybe we can find the kid, or talk to him. And I'm not sure if the child left like on the situation like a runaway where they may have run off and they were angry. But the situation that occurred was that the parents and the family were calling, trying to get a hold of them and leaving messages. Basically, they may have been saying something very simple like, please come back. We don't want you to leave or whatever. And this child was already found dead. And the UK media was aware that the person was already known to be deceased. Yet the family was continuing to make those phone calls and leave those voice messages. And they were pulling those voice messages from the family, right? Now, I don't know what kind of information they wanted to obtain about the relationship the family had with the young person who went missing. But that just goes to show you what were you trying to do? Before the family even knew their child was dead, and you're listening in on the phone calls and the messages that they are leaving for said deceased child, right? Now, if that had been the police listening in because they thought perhaps a murder had been committed, I would be, oh, okay, that makes sense. That's legit. But the UK tabloid media listening in to see if there's some angle they can tell a story, well, I mean, that's absolutely horrific. But those are the type of people that were also included in this court case. And so for them, this is a win. I don't know how much they might obtain in damages, but this portion is a win. And so they're going to continue to proceed. And this is the thing. They're constantly trying to encourage Harry to, back off, back away, or not do. But he told them he's in it for the long haul. And I tell you what, I have to say, I'm behind him 100%. But I don't want any of us to become discouraged in this, because this is for the long haul, folks. This battle that they're fighting is going to be forever. Okay. Now, on another note, and once again, I'm going to tell you guys, please like and subscribe and share. Okay. But this is something totally unrelated, which I told you is kind of cool that I can throw this in there as well. This little photo here is of a sky in my area. I live in the area that was affected by a tornado. Now, I want you all to kind of get a look at this sky. All right. Now, I happen to be out and about in this. I was I was going to run to the drugstore and pick up a prescription. I don't know why, but I picked after the warnings had gone out. And I thought, oh, well, I got at least 30 minutes. It was just a tornado warning. No big deal. And remember, people who live in areas where tornadoes are frequent, we sort of develop this attitude. I don't want to say that it can't happen to us, but we sort of develop this personality of, well, the storm is coming, but I know what to do, so I have time to get ready. And that was kind of me. So I thought, okay, I could run to the store real quick and get back. And hey, this is just a storm coming up, tornado warning. We have those. All right. So I was sort of thinking like that. Well, I want to educate you guys. If you're not in a tornado zone or a tornado area, take a look at this sky. This sky is directly overhead, okay, where you are. And just understand that if this is directly over your head, this is a little bit more of it's just a storm, possibly. The white in those clouds, you see, isn't that beautiful? There's the little white little puff pieces. Well, it is from it is from these areas that the lightning strikes generally are generated, and they come down exactly like a bolt of lightning. Okay. They zigzag down. The lightning streaks come from these little white puffs, and they hit the ground like a bullet. Okay. And that's what you normally see in the beginning of a tornado. You'll start to see lightning. A lot of people forget to mention that. And you'll think, oh, wow, a thunderstorm. If that sky looks like this, no, not, oh, wow, thunderstorm. Oh, wow, tornado coming. And if you look below, you see how it darkens out there on the edge, and it's like a dark line that looks like it's coming downward. Yeah, that's how tornadoes are built. Okay. And so in my area, that is what was happening on Saturday morning. So I want you all to trek with me through this. All right. Now, then when the winds start to kick up, even before an actual touchdown, the winds begin to kick up and get a little lively. And as you can see, trees and poles and things start getting bent and twisted. And I believe some of our winds got up to, if I'm not mistaken, I think they said about 130 miles per hour. And so you have to kind of visualize in your head, if you were in a race car driving at 130 miles per hour and you drove into a pole, That is actually what the wind is doing, right? The wind is tearing through stuff, and it is an amazing thing to see the aftermath. Now, it is just an amazing compilation. Now, the experiencing the tornado on the weekend just brought to mind like other thoughts of things that can create this type of destruction. So this is part of the touchdown. You see the cloud coming down, and you see the wind spiraling down to the ground. And when it hits whatever it's impacting, like that, the winds spin down and impact whatever's on the ground, like your home or your structures. You see those apartments, it smacks into that roof, and it basically goes off like a bombshell, and it just rips everything apart. Now, the bizarreness of a tornado is this can happen to three of those houses, two of the houses that are underneath that wind impact, but then everything next to it is fine. That is what is fascinating about that. But you see, this is what the actual impact can look like. It will rip houses and rooftops apart. And if you notice, these structures aren't super, super sound. It's not like they were solid brick or concrete structures. So when the wind hit them, they fell to pieces. They really did. And it can really impact things very quickly. And so I wanted to put this in perspective of the British would say, how do I draw this parallel? I'm drawing this parallel with some of the impact that the UK elite and the UK British royalty have had all over the world. In essence, the British elite, and this is a picture of a restaurant that was frequented by many of the UK elites over time. The UK elites got together in their world, and they basically determined how they would impact the rest of the world. Well, in most cases, their impact was no different at all than being um, subjected to an absolute tornado strike. Some of the impact of these folks who were super, super wealthy, super, super rich, and in charge of many things, these people had this exact impact on many nations around the world. This group was called, they used to be referred to as the Ton, Ton. And what I read is that that was short for a term, bon temps. It was a French term like good ton. And these folks were like dedicated because of their status, their wealth. They created a network of families, a network of people who basically married in and around each other. Like the wealthy would continue to marry the wealthy. If you were upper middle class and began to make a lot of money, you slip into this group of people who were supposed to be fashionable, high class, and world runners, basically those who impacted the world. And if you could marry into these families or get your toe into this high society, then you too might be invited to some of these elite schools or elite activities. This is what the Ton participated in. But their impact worldwide was devastation on many people, right? And so these gentlemen here, or in these gentlemen like these people who are photographed here, people like this, basically, from the time that they were formed, realized that they could go anywhere in the world, anywhere in the world, and create a situation where they took whatever they wanted, or bought whatever they wanted, or influenced whomever they wanted in order to extract wealth from all of the nations all over the planet. And in the wake of their path, just like the tornado, this is the outcome. This is the aftermath of them going through all these different continents and countries. They basically left them in a situation where they were, without knowing it, they were worse off. And then the only thing they had to do, at least they believed for all of these centuries, is that if they would just imitate these people, these royal people or these extreme elites, that if they just imitated them and their behavior, that they too would be become the elites that they wanted to become. That is what they thought. But I don't know if that is what they actually got. So we're back, always back to the end, and I'm about to wrap it up. And so once again, I'm always intrigued by the little Harry, because that again is who the UK tabloid they think they're dealing with. But trust me, they most certainly are not. They are definitely dealing with the adult version, and they have no idea what they are dealing with. So I wanted to also leave you guys with this other thought. And please like, share. Again, I'm going to have to remind you guys, like, share always, and subscribe if you have time. I would love for many of you to also be added to my subscriber list if you're not, and share with some other folks who might be like-minded. But looking at those folks, I want you to think about the definition of royalty. Now, when we say, when you think of royalty and the people, the monarchs and all of that, the term royalty as is used as in other ways. Now, think about this. When you think about royalties, like royalties from a movie or a song or something like that, it's a payment. And that payment is made to owners of certain type of rights. And remember, these people are the people who developed the actual concept of rights and the concept of licensing. They created that. So basically, they license and create the rights for almost everything. And basically, they tell you that they own what you have. Right? So this term, it originated from the fact that in Great Britain, for centuries, gold and silver mines were the property of the crown. And then royalty also has a historical connection to the feudal system of medieval Europe, right? And that's where the powerful landowners became high-ranking lords, right? And one of them was eventually crowned as a king. And they would do this from region to region. But I mean, focus in on this fact that they considered themselves owners of that property, correct? They owned that property. And then the landlords had the same system where they basically owned the individuals that lived on their land, right? And so the payments that you as an individual make are made to the owners of those certain types of rights. So that is where the term is interconnected with the actual concept of royalty. So our concept of royalty in the UK, right? Basically, all of these things that are properties, they have documents and paperwork where they are basically saying they hold the rights. They hold the rights to what might be your land. Not I say your, but I mean as far as other nations, right? They hold the rights to your gold mines and your silver mines. They own those things. They are the owners. And so whatever is taken from those mines, the silver mines and the gold and all of those things, whatever comes from that, they actually own that because they have the documentation, let's say, or because they conquered and then created the documentations for it, they own it. And that is how they operate today. And that is the origin of royalty. So I just want to end us up here in a positive way with all of these things that I want to say to you all before I wrap it up and get out of here is please know that this battle, the court battles and all of those things that Harry and Meghan are dealing with, that these battles are not finished. They're not over. Okay. And I'm going to read to you just the bottom part of the quote from I say King Harry, right? The bottom part of the quote that his lawyer made for him. And I think it is exactly very much in tune with how he thinks and feels. Because his lawyer read this and he said, today's ruling is vindicating and affirming that he was told that slaying dragons will get you burned. But he said, in light of today's victory, that being the victory of this particular court case, and the importance of doing what is needed for a free and honest press, that it is a worthwhile price to pay. And he put them on notice that the fight and that this mission will continue. All right. Yes. Yay. So, I am definitely one that has to agree with what Harry is dealing with. I have to agree with it. And I have to applaud because he is doing a great job. So, once again, folks, thank you all for hanging out here with me on this chat. And please comment, share, like below. Give me an opportunity to have a reason to keep this going because I am truly enjoying